This is our review for the Xiaomi 10T Pro 5G. So it's been about a week since I first looked at the 10T Pro 5G, and to start things off, I'd like to say that I really like this phone. Well, it's a good phone. It's hard to find fault with it since it does a lot of things so well. I think it's one of the better phones that Xiaomi has released in recent years. My personal phone is a Samsung S20 Plus, so the features aren't really that far off. MIUI definitely works a little differently from One UI, but at the end of the day it's still Android, so it wasn't too hard to get used to. The 10T Pro is definitely not for small hands, but even those who have larger hands like myself would have a bit of trouble using it. I find myself stretching my hand a little wider than I'm used to. You see, the S20 Plus is also a large phone, but this is even larger. Well, a little bit thicker, a little bit wider, definitely more heavy. It weighs in at 218 grams, so it's quite a workout to use it on one hand. So we are using the Cosmic Black version of the phone, but it does come in two other colors, Lunar Silver and Aurora Blue. But the colors don't really matter that much when your back frame is pretty much a mirror. It's really reflective. It's an aluminum frame with Gorilla Glass on the back, which is part of the reason why this phone is on the heavier side, I guess. It feels good though holding it. It feels premium in your hands. But like a lot of other shiny phones, the smudge game's strong. It's a fingerprint magnet. If smudges easily, honestly I'm not surprised. You tend to find yourself constantly wiping it down every now and then. There's a beefy camera bump on the back. I've stated this before, but I'm still quite amused by companies just piling on cameras onto a mobile device. I guess certain cases might be able to offset that bump, but that just means you'll probably just make this phone even thicker. One thing I really like about this phone is the power button. It's recessed into the frame, it's flat. It's really comfortable to use. There's a satisfying feedback when you click on it. The volume buttons are okay. It's a common thin design that sort of stabs into your fingers when you click them, so they're definitely pronounced. It does have a good click though. At the bottom you have a USB-C charging port, and well, you don't have a 3.5mm headphone jack, which is sad, which is unfortunate, which is frustrating that a lot of phones don't have it right now. Xiaomi does provide an adapter that comes with your phone, so that's nice of them. Still, I'll always complain about the lack of headphone jacks in newer phones. There's also a SIM card tray on the bottom of the phone which supports dual SIM, but there's no expandable storage on this phone, so it's quite unfortunate. You are stuck with the internal memory, and the phone comes in either a 128GB model or 256GB model, which is a fair bit of memory, especially if you consider cloud-based storage like Google Drive. General usage is definitely smooth on the 10T Pro. Calls are clear, both incoming and outgoing. Sometimes we tend to forget that smartphones are, well, they're still phones, and the 10T Pro serves that basic function very well. The speakers are located on the bottom and the top of the phone, so you get the benefit of a stereo speaker system. They do get quite loud, and I've had no problems at all using the speakers. Now, another thing I really like about this phone is the Fingerprint Reader. Well, first of all, it's not on the screen. So many devices have it on the screen, and I'm honestly not a fan of that. The power button acts as the fingerprint reader, which is probably why the design is flat, and this thing is really responsive. Look at that. It's just so instant, right? I don't even look at it, I don't have to look, I'm just closing my eyes. It's fast, it's quick, it's smooth. That's what I need from a phone. I'm not really applying any force, it's just a tap. It makes unlocking your phone such a satisfying process, and honestly, it's one of the best features about this phone. The battery life on this phone is quite great actually. It has a 5000 mAh battery, and I found it to easily last a day while still having a bit of charge for the second day. However, the 10T Pro does not support wireless charging. By default, the phone comes with a new control center activated through MIUI 12, which is quite inspired by iOS, and I'm not really a fan of it. So I switched it back to the older control center, which is something I'm more used to. But it's nice of Xiaomi to give the user the option to choose between the two so they don't just lock you in to that control center. I guess some people out there might like the new control center, but it's really not for me. There also seems to be less bloatware on the phone, which is great, and most of the bloatware that are present can be uninstalled quite easily. So kudos on Xiaomi for not shoving unnecessary apps into our faces. Let's talk about the other great feature of the phone, which is the display. It's not OLED, it's not AMOLED, it's an LCD display. Specifically an IPS display, which are known to have really good color accuracy. And the thing that ties it all together is the 144Hz refresh rate, which is smooth. It's buttery smooth. Now my current phone has a 120Hz display. It's not too far from the 144Hz. I do notice the additional smoothness and it's fine. The higher up you go, you never want to go back down, honestly. The phone does give you options to reduce your refresh rate in case you want to preserve battery life, but honestly, you don't really need to do that. Scrolling through apps, web pages, menus, it just breezes by smoothly. Like I said, it's an IPS display, so you're not going to get that vibrant, punchy OLED colors, but that's fine. It displays colors amazingly and HDR videos work quite well on it. Now, I'm not much of a mobile gamer. I prefer to do my gaming on a PC. But I did test out some popular games on it. Genshin Impact looks pretty great on the phone. It runs smoothly, the colors are wonderful, especially because it's such a colorful game. I also tried out Maple Story since it's a lot of colors and there's a lot of things going on, and that worked out quite well. Asphalt, a racing game, it's a really boring game, but the racing aspect, I really want to see how it runs on the high refresh rate. And since we're talking about games, let's segue into the performance of the phone. The 10T Pro 5G houses a Snapdragon 865 processor with 8GB of RAM, which is quite a beefy setup. Well, it's more than enough to do your everyday tasks, but it's also good enough to play larger games on it, like Genshin Impact. When I loaded up the game, the graphics settings were set to medium by default, and it ran well on medium, very smooth gameplay, especially considering the display. And I turned it up to the highest setting and it still ran really well. I did lose a couple of frames, but it was still really smooth without having any frame drops. But the phone does get a bit warm on longer sessions, so you might want to keep that in mind. The main camera is a 108 megapixels. That's a lot of megapixels. And it also has a wide angle camera, which is 13 megapixels, and a macro camera, which is 5 megapixels. The front selfie cam is a 20 megapixel camera. Photo quality is generally quite good and what you expect for a phone. 108 megapixels doesn't mean much when you're talking about a phone camera sensor, which is tiny compared to a DSLR camera. You can get decent shots with the cameras. You lose quality with the auxiliary wide angle and macro cameras, but as long as you're shooting in good lighting conditions, your images should turn out fine. The phone is also able to record video up to 8K 30 frames per second, which is quite good, but it's also expected nowadays. 8K isn't really much of a surprising thing when every other flagship also has it. The stabilization mode is quite good though when you're recording video. However, it's not available when you're recording in 8K. Like all cameras on phones these days, it has a chock full of features. Slow-mo, portrait mode, low light mode, filters, the list goes on and on. So how do I feel about the Xiaomi 10T Pro 5G? The features are all great, but most of it is similar to the non-Pro version, the 10T 5G. The only difference is that the Pro version has a 256GB model, it has a beefier main camera, and it's a bit more expensive. So I'm not quite sure why both phones exist. Wouldn't it be much more streamlined to have the non-Pro version just X'd out and just have the Pro version instead? You know, since both phones are just almost exactly the same. And while the 10T Pro does seem to get all the other great stuff that other flagship phones tend to get, it also gets all the bad stuff. Like no expandable storage, no headphone jack. But honestly, the price is the best thing going on for it. It's listed at $749 in Singapore, which is a great price, especially since it has similar features to other flagship phones, which are way more expensive. At the end of the day, I'll give the Xiaomi 10T Pro 5G a 9 out of 10. It's a feature-rich phone at a respectable price point. The display is great, the performance is wonderful. However, despite having all the great features, it doesn't really differentiate itself much from other Android phones, especially amongst its own Xiaomi lineup. It follows all the current trends and it does it well. Now, if you've enjoyed watching our review for the Xiaomi 10T Pro 5G, you can check out our other videos available on our website at thehomeground.asia, where we have other tech reviews, unboxings, anything tech related and more. And until then, I'll see you next time.